We're now going to look at the null value in PHP and understand what it means and what it means for a variable to have a value of null. And we'll also take a look at a function as well, or a couple of functions that allow us to work with null values. So basically what null is it's a variable that either has been assigned the constant null, so there's null basically looks like this as a constant. We also have a null value if we have a variable that hasn't been defined a value yet. So for in this example, name will be null. And also we have a function in PHP called unset, which will remove the contents of a variable and it will be null. So we can say null unset name if name previously contained a value. So let's just play around with these three different scenarios. So I'm going to say name equals null, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do a var dump, which again is extremely useful if we need to work out whether a value has a null value or not. Not actually check if it has a null value, but determine whether it does, so we can use the isNull function, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. So I'm going to do a var dump on that and refresh, and you can see that this just says null. It will just come up with null. Now if we were to say name is Alex, or in fact let's just declare name but not set a value to it, we get exactly the same results. It just says null, so it's an undefined variable, so it hasn't had any value set to this. We also can use unset, so if we were to bring back the string and then use unset on name and we var dump on name, we also will get a null value back. And again it says undefined variable because technically now this has been unset and it contains null. So what we can actually do is we can check if something has been set or not using isNull. So for example, if I say name at the top of the page here and I say if, so I'm going to use an if statement here and I'm going to say isNull name, name equals Alex, and then down here I'm going to echo name. So this might look a little bit confusing, but all we basically have is an if statement here. So we're checking the value that's returned from this isNull function. We're passing in this name variable here just to check whether it's null or not. So we're basically passing this in. So what we get back is if we get true back, we're going to basically just set this name. Otherwise we'll return false because this function returns true if a variable that we provide to it is null, or false otherwise. So if we go ahead and refresh the page now, we get Alex here. So we're still getting this notice because we have an undefined variable which we're actually passing in to check, but regardless we've actually check this and set a value, whereas if we obviously didn't have this check, we would just be echoing out something that wasn't set. So that's basically null values, and the var dump function or language construct is extremely useful here because basically what it means is that we can check the type. In this case it's going to be a string of length 4 because we've defined this here now that we know that it's null, and that's it, we've output the value. So you'll come across null in certain circumstances. Now null is a slightly confusing in the sense that sometimes it's mixed up with the Boolean value false, but in actual fact this isn't true. Null is a constant, it's not a variable type, so it's not false, it's not 0. So for example we can check this. So let's just say var equals false, and we'll say null equals null. So we'll say result equals var is equal to null. So we're doing a check if var is equal to null or not, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do a var dump on result. This is going to give us a true or a false value back. So if we refresh, it says false here. So false does not equal null. Now what if we use a double equals, which doesn't use type checking? Let's go ahead and see this as well. it says true. So this is a little confusing in the sense that it does actually return true. So this will return true, but it will return false if we use type checking as well, because these two are of essentially different types. So it's a little bit confusing, but it's fundamentally, not the same value. It would be exactly the same if we were to say, does 0 is 0 equal to null, and in this case we would get true back as well. But obviously, if we were to say does 0 absolutely with type checking equal null, then we would get back the value false, because it doesn't. So yeah, I mean, it's a good thing to play around with, but it's sort of fundamental to understand that null doesn't mean that a variable holds the value false.